Hi, I'm Theo Anist, and today I'm going to be showing you my swing leech in the olive and black. Real effective fly on the Miracle Mile and about anywhere I've swung it. So here we go. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to break a shank. I just want one with a decent sized hook eye. I'm using 50-pound gel spun backing to attach my stinger hook. And the first thing, and probably the most complicated part of this fly, is setting up the stinger hook. So I'll show you how to do that real quick. So I'm going to put the hook and the vise on the eye first, and then I'm going to thread my cone head, and I'm using a small black tungsten cone head on this particular one. And once that's on, I'm just going to thread that over the eye like so. And then I'm going to do my surgeon's knot, or I'm sorry, surgeon's loop rather, to attach my stinger hook. And usually want to do 2 times through on the surgeon's loop. And generally on this particular pattern, I don't want a big loop because it's not going to be a really long fly. We want it to look like a leech. So, most of the steelhead stuff you buy, well, that's great for steelhead, but when we're fishing for trout, we want to kind of size it down just a little bit. So I'll cut the excess there. And you probably want to get some sharper scissors if you're cutting gel spun. Alright, so back that hook up. And then I just want to slide that knot so it's just right there, right about where the hook shank ends. And it's a short hook shank. That's what gives this fly its movement, is just using a short shank. Alright, so once I have that set up now, I'm going to then turn it around in the vise and start tying the fly. And you just want to make sure that that hook eye is straight in there. Alright, now as far as your thread, I use a gel spun 75 GSP UTC thread. Just a little bit stronger thread and really allows you to bind down into the rabbit strip that you're tying. Anytime you're tying a streamer that's going to get grabbed on a short shank like this, you want to make sure you have a pretty strong thread and really bind that thread down just so it doesn't fall off when a fish grabs it. So I'm going to take that extra piece, that extra leg that I used to do this stinger loop, and I'm just going to wrap that around a couple times. Make sure it's not going to go anywhere. And if I were tying this fly with the idea that I was going to give it to anybody, what I would probably do after completing this step is put a little drop of Zap-A-Gap right here on this just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. But for the sake of time and not having to watch paint dry in this video, we'll go ahead and skip that step. Alright, so just so you can see what I'm doing here. Once I've done this, I'm going to go ahead and put my stinger hook on now. And just take that loop, thread it through. And attach my stinger. So that's going to be about the length. If you see, it's about maybe 2 inches long. And then at this point, I'm now going to put on my rabbit strip. And what I do is I pierce the strip through here on the back end. And I like to do this first just in case you mess this step up and just tear the thread. You haven't tied the whole fly yet. So you can easily just grab another piece of rabbit and do it over again. So we're going to pierce that through, and you'll see that's about where I've pierced it through, just a little bit of rabbit strip, coming off the back, just enough to cover the stinger hook. And I'm going to bring that through, and at this point I'm just going to pull the rest of that rabbit strip through. And take a little time here just to make sure you're not ripping all the hair off when you're doing this. Sewing needle, if I had one right here, save you a little bit of time, but for some reason that always becomes the needle in the haystack literally when I'm tying a bunch of flies, so it's somewhere on this desk, but couldn't tell you where at the moment. Alright, so we want to size that up. We're going to slide that hair back so it just covers the stinger. And see how it is tight. And if you have a little bit of extra rabbit, go ahead and cut that off. And at this point, I'm just going to really make sure I bind that rabbit strip down, because if you don't quite get it on there good, fish will grab it and they'll rip that tail right off. Alright, so now I'm really going to put some heat on that thread, make sure it's not going anywhere. Alright, so now at this point, we're going to go to our next step, which is to create a dubbing loop. And here's a little trick. What I do is I take a hook and I get it in here. I split the thread. Oop, let's try that again. Alright, so we split the thread, open it up, and basically what I've done now by doing that is created a dubbing loop. So I just take a hook, stick it through the middle of the thread. You need a UTC thread to do that with. And then I'm going to take a I-stub in UV black, and I'm just going to stack it in that dubbing loop. And I just want to make sure it's evenly spread out throughout the loop. Alright, give the thread a little twist, and start dubbing that on. And with each spin, I just want to just pull it all back, like so. And sometimes I'll get in here, the back end of my whip finisher, and just pull a little bit of that out to kind of give it some length there. Alright, now my final step is I'm going to tie in my marabou. And I had one set aside here. Alright, so we're going to tie it in tip first, and we want to strip it down so that the fibers aren't going to be any longer than the tail. And this is a black blood quill strung marabou. It's probably the best for spinning. And tie it in at the tip. Cut out the extra bit. And I'm going to use a rotating, a lot of focus here, hopefully that hadn't been too long. I'm going to take some rotating hackle pliers, just makes this a little easier. Nice suggestion from somebody who watched me do this with my hands for so long and said, hey, have you ever thought about rotating hackle pliers? And I said, yeah, that probably would be easier. So with every spin, just want to make sure that you're not grabbing fibers from the last one. Just make sure it's spinning around evenly and not getting caught up in itself. So once you're done spinning that on, just go ahead and bring that thread around, capture that little stem, Get up the extra bit. And that's about the proportion you want there. A little of that UV shining through, but you don't want it to blind the fish, you just want it to kind of wink at them. And at this point, we are done with this fly. We're going to whip finish it, and return whip finish behind the cone head. Give it a good tug with that gel spun, and it ain't going to break. And that right there is the North Platte Swing Leech. Awesome fly up here, and it's worked for me equally well on Colorado. Fishing on single-handed rods, two-handed rods. This thing isn't super fancy. It doesn't take a long time to tie, but it certainly catches fish, and that's what we want.